All right, today we are reviewing Radically Relevant by Blake Howard. And the subtitle of this is How Growing Brands Can Get Unstuck and Move Forward with Confidence. So, the reason I read this book is I saw Blake speak at a local web conference called Brighter Web. And prior to that, I read this book on the plane ride coming back from Austin, knowing that I was going to see him speak at this conference. And he is a co-founder of a brand identity house called Matchstic here in Atlanta. And they used to have an office down the street from me in Grant Park in the Larkin building, which is right next to a bakery called Little Tart. And I was a co-working place built out of shipping containers that I worked out of when I was considering moving to Atlanta while I was living in an Airbnb for a month or two in Reynoldstown. So it's this weird full circle thing that I always saw their sign and was like, oh, that looks like a cool design place, but I never knocked on the door and said hi or anything. But they were on my radar forward years and years later, and here we are reading Radically Relevant. So it's this book about, it is a book about crafting an effective brand identity. And this is basically the Matchstick way, or their methodology and thinking on how to do that. So first impressions of the book is it's, stake here. It's a beautifully designed book. Was designed by Matchstick, and in the credits a gentleman named Brian Paul Nelson, who obviously is a very talented guy. It's printed by Modern Litho or Lithograph or Modern Litho out of Missouri. But anyway, it's a beautiful book. It's got all sorts of awesome illustrations. There's variations in the size and quotes. Reminds me of definitely a very designy type book. A little bit in a good way of Zag by Marty Neumeier. That it has a nice rhythm and variation to it. And it's a short read. It's only, 150 pages or so. Went through it on a couple plane rides. So kind of a nice book, almost, I wouldn't say coffee table book, but it's kind of a nice reference to refresh new ideas. A few of the things it goes through, the main idea is that you want to be as well as relevant to category and the times that you're operating in. And so there's a few frameworks in this book that are really useful. Kind of out by laying some context in mapping out what stage of growth your brand is in. So he's got these challenger, established, legacy, and dying. So how you approach some of this kind of on where you're starting from. And he's got this 2x2 matrix, which is where the radically relevant piece comes in. And so you've got outlaws and outcasts. This is on the kind of axis. You've got outlaws and outcasts versus the dated and dying. And on the relevance scale, you've got copycat, and then you've got the radically relevant, which is the upper right of that 2x2, which is where you want to be. And he goes through and defines these and the characteristics of each one of these groups, but it's pretty clean mapping. 2x2 matrices are always awesome for just kind of with a good lay of the land. And then he goes through the super six, are the characteristics that you need to work on to come up to want your brands to become radically relevant. And those are clarity, distinction, control. Those are part of the radical column. And then on the relevance, it's attraction, devotion, and alignment. And he goes through and describes each one of these, what they mean and how you would work on it depending on what type of situation you find yourself in. So it goes through the types of things that many brands, if you look at their client list at Matchstick, they're kind of blue chip brands. Some of them are local here to Atlanta, and some of them are big kind of brands. So it addresses some challenges that companies have, such as when you have a product, have different product lines. Are they sub-brands of the parent brand? Are they standalone brands? When you make acquisitions, how do you fold them in? How do you deal with brands that are old and tired? All these different situations you may find yourself in. And basically this radically relevant framework is a way of thinking about that and tackling those through those super six kind of other things of note. It's a great book. It's very easy and approachable. Obviously their kind of methodology. So there's a little bit of I wouldn't call it a sales pitch, but it's kind of the Matchstick way, I think would be a fair way to characterize the book. is a radically relevant website where you can score, radically relevant your brand is. Also, they have a podcast, or Blake is part of a podcast that's quite good. If you're interested in branding, called A Change of Brand, where they tackle, redesigns. Heard him interview someone who took on unifying a lot of Amazon's brands. There's stuff on there about the Cracker Barrel rebrand. So anyway, if you're into design, branding, identity, give a thumbs up to Radically Relevant by Blake Howard. Take it easy.